All right, welcome everyone to the Language and Behavior Podcast. This is episode number 1. I'm super excited as Charlie, Peck, and I have been working not only on a book, but we've been doing also free webinars. We've been doing a free summit for folks. And with that, Charlie, thank you so much for not only joining me on this project, but really just partnering with me in so many different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so natural for us. It just makes sense. So we have a lot to say to people, but we're going to answer people's questions too along the way because they keep asking us with all the work we've been doing. So I am super excited to do this with you.
Wonderful. So with that, Charlie, do you want to just give a little bit about background of yourself and the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so you all, I'm a former teacher. I taught high school for 18 years and I got to teach about mental health. And so I saw all the problems from the inside. And then I decided to get into the mental health world as a clinical therapist. I'm doing work as a school-based therapist, but also the most important thing is we're just trying to change the darn system. It's not working, it's fractured. So the work that I'm doing, like Josh, I'm doing speaking across the country, talking about the ways we're making these changes, but also doing workshops and supporting people through consultations. And really, it's about consulting about school mental health transformation. So it's exciting work.
Yes, it is. And I threw your website up on the screen for those who are watching on YouTube. And I just love the folks that are on there. So make sure that you're pushing subscribe and like on the various channels that this is on. And for myself, I'm Joshua Stamper. I'm also a keynote speaker, consultant, love working with educators. I started in the world of leadership. So I was an assistant principal for almost a decade. Did that where I was working with student behavior every single day. Absolutely loved it, but made the shift over and now supporting in a lot of different ways, similar to Charlie, also an author, podcaster, do a lot of other things on the side too, working with Teach Better and the director of innovation for them. But with that, super excited to not only have this book coming out soon, Charlie, but continue to do work with webinars, with supporting with, like you were saying, with workshops and keynotes in the future, specifically on this topic. And I would love to kind of jump into what we're going to discuss today for episode 1. And we have a question. And the question is the traditional way we're responding to behaviors working? So where would you like to go with that?
Well, let me just first say, I think we all know the answer. No, it's not. It's not. It's a clear answer today, but we're going to talk about why and what we can do about it. So Josh and I do not like getting stuck in the problem. We like to pose the problem, but we like to actually provide solutions that are something that you can actually start doing. So that's where we'll start. So I'm going to talk about like challenging the traditional behavior response that we're having. So Josh, I'm going to first throw that right back to you because you saw it from a systems leadership perspective. And what is it that kept coming up that you saw that just wasn't working over and over?
Yeah. Before I do that, though, real quick, I wanted folks to know that, we've gotten a lot of questions from our webinars and from the trainings that we're doing. But if you are listening and you have something specific that you would like us to touch on for this podcast, I'm going to throw up a form for those who are watching on YouTube, but it's also going to be in the show notes. It's just literally a question, which is, what is your question for the podcast? And it's super quick and simple for you to fill out. But we would love your input. We want to know what's your struggles, what your pain points are on the campus, at the district, or anywhere in life. Maybe you're a business and you've got some behaviors that you're dealing with potentially as a coworker or a leader. I think all avenues of life, this will work as far as the podcast go to give you strategies. But yes. So as an administrator, to answer your question, Charlie, yeah, I was extremely frustrated. I actually almost walked away. At the time, I was a dean of students. That role in Texas was that you were in charge of all of the student behavior. I had almost 1,300 kids on the campus in Dallas, and it was a really struggling population. And what I had in my tool belt and what the expectation was to punish with detentions, Saturday school, ISS, or in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, even to the greatest level of expulsion. And I had expulsions that year also. And what I felt was that we were just pushing kids into a room or pushing them out into the community, telling them they weren't wanted in the educational environment, and the behaviors and the relationships broke down. And really the data showed that the behaviors weren't going away. And in fact, they were increasing. And so for myself, I was at a breaking point, and I almost walked away from leadership and education as a whole, because I felt like for myself, I just wasn't doing justice to anybody. I felt like a complete failure in the role. So for me, I knew traditional behavior responses were like what we were doing was not working. And I think everybody teachers, administration, students, the community too. Everyone was frustrated. Nobody was happy, and they were all just pointing fingers as to who was the problem, and no one was really finding a different solution. So that's where this work came from in my own journey, was to seek out, some differences and things that can be alternatives that I could put in place at the campus level to help really build trust with the kids, change the behavior, and make them better people and adults for the future.
Yeah, well, that's it. And they show up to our schools so much, Josh. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to address it here. One of the things you and I do, which I really loved, is we're not afraid to throw out some opinions that may not be favorable, but we have to challenge the system and we have to say, listen, if you are working with kids in any capacity, you are a caregiver. You have a responsibility to help form their life plan with them, guide them, just like parents do. Now, of course, parents have the responsibility, but we have a responsibility in doing that too. In the way, like the time that we spend with them, every minute impacts them. It could go either way, right? It could be detrimental or it could be helpful. That's why I keep it really simple when I teach. Is it helpful or harmful? Or helpful or hurtful, right? You could use that language. And that's it. So every decision we make, like whether or not we're showing up with that energy that they're going to receive in a positive way or not, that is a decision we're making every day. But if we're struggling and we show up to the system struggling, they are certainly going to absorb our energy and our negativity. And it's an easy thing to do in education these days, to show up with negativity because we are frustrated. So again, we like to focus on solutions. So let me just share the statistic that I use in keynotes all the time. It's just so important. So think about it. 50% of all lifetime mental illness will show up by just the age of 14 years old. 50% of kids or people who are going to have some kind of mental illness will show up by the age of 14. So think about that as an elementary level teacher. You've got these kids who have potentially this predisposition to have a mental illness. And so what you do can influence how they show up in middle school. And what you do then in middle school, when some of those symptoms do show up, then it affects how they're going to show up in high school and then higher ed or in the work world or in the world of family. So everything we do when we're working with kids matters. So what are your thoughts around that, Josh? And then where do you want to take that?
Oh my goodness. Well, my first thought is I was working in the middle schools and I could totally understand that. I mean, we started to uncover quite a bit of things at the middle school level where their brains and their bodies were changing, and it was very evident that some things were going on, and uncovering things that potentially were happening at home too that no one knew about. And there's a real reason behind the behavior. And that's really what the book's about. That's about what we talk about is, I mean, the language of behavior is saying that the behavior is telling us something. What is it telling us? And for educators, I know a lot of times we want to think that we're only in the schools to present content. We also have to understand that there's another caveat there as an educator. And it doesn't matter your role, that you're there to help with the student's emotional well-being too. And there's a whole component there that if the kids aren't acting and behaving in class, they're not really learning. So, what are we doing to have these strategies? So I'm super excited, Charlie, as far as the podcast goes, because I think, we really can help folks. But yeah, I'm agreeing with you as far as that stat goes. I can totally see that within my experience in the middle schools.
Yeah. And so the way that I always take this is we've got to strengthen the individual's capacity to regulate their emotions. So
Yep.
I'm not just talking about the kids, you all. I'm talking about the adults, because adults are walking into these buildings, these classrooms, these offices, and they've got their own stuff they haven't dealt with. Now, this isn't new. You know that because we've been talking about this for a while. We talk about trauma informed and understanding the triggers and all of that. And sometimes that language gets lost. Like sometimes people get hung up on, I'm so sick of talking about triggers or trauma. SEL, all of that. I get it. I get it. As educators, we've been through so many professional development sessions and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm just sick of hearing this. Let's do something different already. But it comes down to some of the basics. It's about how do we manage ourselves so that we can show up to our roles energized, confident. And so when we're working with teachers, one of the things they're saying to us is, I don't have the skills. I was never taught in my college program how to actually manage my classroom, how to actually respond effectively to student behaviors. I don't even know what to look for, and you tell me to say that they're anxious, they have anxiety. Well, what the heck does that look like, and how does that affect me? I'm just trying to teach them the content I'm going to teach. Now that is more prevalent, that attitude is more prevalent in the high school level because they are content specific. And elementary teachers, they tend, in middle school, they tend to have a more whole child approach, and they get it, but they still feel so ill-equipped. And they're like, these behaviors are out of control. I cannot believe it. And I just don't know what to do. So the answer is to equip teachers first. I mean, certainly parents, but that's like a community thing that we're still trying to do. But in our schools, we need to equip teachers. So we need to be way more targeted so that they can regulate their own emotions and then help kids to regulate their emotions too. We have lots of programming around this already, but why isn't it working? We've been doing SEL, we've been doing advisory classes, we've been teaching kids for 30 years about all of these things, about regulating the emotions and all of these programs, which are great. There's so much evidence to support that we do need to teach kids how to be resilient and how to cope. The problem is it's not working. And so we have to shift the system. And that's, Josh, what you and I are doing was we're challenging the system first. And then our podcast is going to cover all of those pieces in little pieces so that we can help equip you over and over and over.
Yep, for sure. And I know there's a lot of things that are pain points and things that are barriers to this work also. And we felt it, we've experienced it as teachers in our different roles in education. So we understand that sometimes we're going to throw things out, and the first thing that comes to mind is the barrier that's not going to allow you to do that. And just know that it is possible. And we're going to show you how to do that as much as possible on this podcast. And so I know for the educators that we work with too, like that's what our work is about, is trying to work through that to make sure that you are having the best educational environment possible, whatever your role, whatever the setting. And we know that sometimes it's difficult, especially when you're in the midst of it, right? So, this is October. Behaviors right now in this month, data has shown all over the country that they're spiking right now. Kids are getting comfortable. They know their environments. They are going to start challenging during this time. And, hopefully throughout the year, Charlie and I can support you in that. And it doesn't have to just be here, right? If you have something that's you're trying to work through, contact us. Charlie and I love working with folks all the time, specifically in this realm. And so we're here beyond just, the 15, 20 minutes on this podcast.
Yeah. And so this is what we're saying to you. So the systemic change can absolutely be slow. We know that there's so many policies to change, and there's just so many people in the system changing in the system. And so it can be really slow, but we can speed it up when we each make the change. And we can just take that frustration that we're feeling and just redirect it towards a solution that's within our control. We're not going to make those big changes this is one thing I always say too, is I say to the teachers, like, what is it that you want to change when you go back into work tomorrow? Or, if I'm doing this on a Friday, then on Monday. And they have all these ideas of change, and they're systemic changes. And I said, great, go advocate for that. So that can happen over time. But when you step in the classroom tomorrow, that is not changing. But you will continue being frustrated. It's just like when we're in a relationship with someone and we have this expectation and they're not meeting the expectation, and we keep getting frustrated over and over and over. But really, it's about us redirecting that or reframing that and thinking differently about it so that we're not frustrated anymore. And that's where we've got to start.
Yep, it's that mindset. And I know in that frustration, we typically just revert back to traditional practices. So we're asking you to keep that alternative mindset, make sure that you are growing in your journey as far as an educator. And we're super excited, y'all. Like, we're beyond excited to not only present this in a book, but also in a podcast form. So subscribe in your podcast platform. Make sure that if you have a question, again, there's going to be a form in the show notes. It's just a quick Google form, just asking for your questions specifically on student behavior or some things that are going on your campus or in your district that you would like assistance on. And then, Charlie, I know, I threw up your website before, but if people want more information about the work that you're doing, how could they contact or connect with you on social media?
Yeah, just go to thrivingeducator.org. You can also email me at Charle, CHARLE @thrivingeducator.org. And I'm on a couple of places like X and LinkedIn at Charlie Peck. There's no I in my name, just so y'all know.
It's true. Every device I have wants to default with the eye. I
I'm
have
so
to really check that every time I communicate with Charlie. But yeah, Charlie's amazing. Reach out to her, and connect to y'all. Like, she's putting out content galore. So make sure that you're getting on her email list. For myself, joshtemper.com is the easiest to get all of my content. I have another podcast, the book, whatnot. So check it out there. And of course, you can go to joshua@teachbetter.com is my email if you have any questions or need any support in any way. So with that, Charlie, we are done with episode 1. Congratulations.
Thank you. You all, we have so much more to come with tons of strategies. This is just a little intro. So we hope to see you back.
Yep. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.